Greetings, travelers! I am Nyckelhypa. Welcome to Nyckelhypa's Unpopular Opinions, a new series that I plan to host regularly on YouTube, right here from the comfort of my unpopular opinion library. Now believe me, I have a lot of unpopular opinions. In fact, considering that I'm not popular on YouTube or in real life, one could say that all of my opinions are unpopular by default. Anyway, let me check volume 272 of my notebook of contrarian ramblings in order to locate this episode's unpopular opinion. How about an opinion that begins with the letter M? I feel like that would be good for this video. Let's see. Metallica's Master of Puppets album is an inferior clone of the previous album, Ride the Lightning. Nah, that won't do. There may be some old school thrash metal fans that agree with this too easily. Let's see, what else have we got here? Mass Effect 1 is actually better than Mass Effect 2. Nah, also too easy. My magical mongoose might maim my manhood unless I get to the point. Fair enough. In my unpopular opinion, Maximus Decimus Meridius is one of the worst protagonists ever to be considered a great movie hero. How do we know many think of him as a great movie hero? Well, for one, he has a place on AFI's, that is, American Film Institution's Greatest Heroes in Film History list. He's only number 50, but he is on the list. Also, my dear departed grandmother used to say, Maximus Decimus Meridius is the best movie hero of all time. All other movie heroes are a bucket of farts in comparison to General Maximus Decimus Meridius. Now, my grandmother was already senile when she expressed this opinion. Not as senile as the AFI, mind you. So I'll forgive her, but I will still explain why she was wrong. Before I do that, know that you can skip to this time code to hear me articulate why I might be wrong. I plan to dedicate a brief part of each unpopular opinion video to addressing potential counterarguments. So, Maximus Decimus Meridius is a tool. Not a figurative tool. I'm not using the Urban Dictionary definition. Maximus is a literal tool, a character almost completely devoid of personality. He lacks depth and he has very little agency of his own during most of Gladiator's story. Can I demonstrate this? Why yes, I believe I can, by asking two simple questions. 1. Does Maximus have an internal conflict during most of the film? And 2. Who or what drives Maximus' actions during most of the film? If the answer to the first question is no, then Maximus lacks depth. If the answer to the second question is not Maximus himself, then he lacks agency. I believe that if I can show these two premises to be correct, then I will have proven that Maximus isn't a good protagonist. That said, let's analyze the first part of the film. Maximus appears to start out as a round character. At first, it would seem that he has a powerful, if simple, internal conflict. He must follow the orders of his emperor and lead Rome's armies, but what he really wishes he could do is go home. The writers amplify this conflict when Marcus Aurelius asks Maximus to take over from him and ensure the process of returning Rome to the state of being a republic. This is where the problems with Maximus' character writing begin to manifest themselves. The first issue I have is that Maximus doesn't seem remotely interested in questioning whether being away from his family on a bloody conquest for almost 3 years was worth it. When Marcus Aurelius asks, "How will the world remember me when I'm gone?" and laments that so few of his years as Caesar have been without war and bloodshed, Maximus starts to reveal his tool-like nature and replies, In the next line of dialogue, Marcus Aurelius clarifies that Maximus hasn't even been to Rome. This makes Maximus look like a blind follower, an extremely loyal patriot of Rome that believes he's completely in the right and that Rome is the light. He doesn't question whether conquering nations is moral or ethical. But what's much worse, it makes it difficult for me as an audience member to care about Maximus' family, when Maximus himself seems to think that the sacrifice of leaving his family behind for years was absolutely worth it for the glory of Rome. A glory which, according to Marcus Aurelius, is either vastly exaggerated or a total myth. Usually when a story centers on a character that is a soldier, the writers will give that character more depth by making them occasionally question their orders. You know, a soldier character might wonder if it would not have been better for them to stay at home. They may ask what gives them a right to kill other people that are also just following orders. They may even question whether the war they take part in is at all just. Before I move on, let me give you just one example of such a character. Cecil Harvey, from the 1991 Super Nintendo role-playing game Final Fantasy IV. Like Maximus, Cecil is commanded by his emperor or king to attack innocent nations and steal their resources. However, unlike Maximus, Cecil eventually stands up to his king and decides that he will not follow further orders if those orders are unethical and include him having to attack innocent people. This event begins the quite fantastic story of this classic JRPG that I highly recommend to anyone who is into role-playing games and has yet to experience it. Allow me to get back to my point, which is a 1991 SNES video game hero has much more depth than Maximus Decimus Meridius, a supposed all-time great film protagonist. Coming back to Maximus, the film shows pretty clearly that his family is nothing more than a plot device when Maximus tells Cicero that they will not be able to go home after all. It appears that Maximus has put the glory of Rome ahead of his family on his list of priorities once again, and while we can reasonably assume that he didn't have a choice when he was first conscripted into the army, this time the emperor did give him a choice. Maximus could have said no, but after a night of deliberation, he's already saying to Cicero that they may not be able to go home. It makes the words "I live only to hold my wife and son again" ring incredibly hollow. In a previous scene with Lucilla, who is a much more interesting character, but we'll get to that, Maximus states, "I will always serve Rome." While such commitment might be considered admirable and honorable for a soldier, it really bothers me that this is Maximus' standpoint moments after the emperor, whose orders had him kill and conquer and not see his family for over 2 years, confessed that in his opinion, Maximus had been fighting for a false cause all along. Marcus Aurelius had no confidence that his conquest was morally justified, but Maximus never seemed to doubt that it was. That's a problem. It should have been the other way around. For Maximus to A, have depth, and B, look like he actually loved his family more than anything else on this earth. As it is, all the scenes where Maximus talks about his wife and son now appear to only be in the film to make sure they emotionally manipulate the audience into caring about Maximus getting his vengeance after his family is brutally murdered. It's not a case of Maximus loved his family more than anything and lost them. It's actually more like Maximus loved Rome more than anything, but he also had a family, I guess, so please feel sympathy for him. This problem doesn't disappear once Maximus is betrayed and his family slain either. It is just as bad or worse during the final third of the film that takes place in Rome. On a side note, I have a proposal for how this problem could have been fixed, and the character of Maximus and the film as a whole could have been significantly improved. How about this? Maximus takes a few hours to think about the emperor's request, meanwhile feeling his anger growing at how he has wasted years in war away from his wife and son. At the end of the scene, Maximus decides to tell the emperor off, because he loves his family more than he loves Rome. In fact, he couldn't care less about what happens to this empire of false glory now. However, he is too late. Commodus has already killed Marcus Aurelius and given the order to slay Maximus and his family. Look me in the eye and tell me that would not have been better. More tragic for Maximus, because he chose his family over Rome, but lost them anyway. And also more tragic for Commodus, because he would have inherited his father's throne anyway, since Maximus turned it down. So, he killed his father for nothing. Seriously, tell me that would not have been better, and that it would not have made clearer that Maximus actually loved his wife and son more than anything. By the way, I'm not a brilliant writer of any kind. In fact, my grandmother's loss of critical thinking in her twilight years is probably hereditary, so I'm already a half-assed dumbass. If I can improve a big-budget, multi-Oscar winning film, and specifically its main character's story, with one small change, you know the film has some serious problems. Before we get to how Maximus continues to suck as a character when in Rome, let's quickly analyze the middle portion of Gladiator. Allow me to compliment the film here and say that the middle part is by far the best. I like Proximo. He's a wonderful bastard of a character with a ton of charisma, and he's entertaining as hell. I also love how Maximus at his lowest point is juxtaposed with Commodus at his highest. This is all good stuff. What I dislike about the middle of the film is how Maximus gets his desire to survive and fight back because of Proximo's speeches. Before Proximo lectures him and his fellow gladiators, Maximus seems perfectly willing to give up and die, which makes sense given what he has lost. I don't see why the writers could not have given Maximus a different motivation than following the advice of some old man again. In the extended edition, there is a scene where the big German dude informs everyone that the best gladiators can win back their freedom. This information is what should have sprung Maximus back into action. After all, if he wins his freedom, he has a slight chance of avenging the murder of his family. Instead, Maximus throws his sword at some nobles and yells, "Are you not entertained?" at the common folk, in an attempt to prove some point that is never made clear, after Proximo tells him to be more entertaining. I can understand and forgive Maximus not having an internal conflict during his early scenes as a gladiator. He has lost his family, lost his position, and because a potentially crucial scene was cut out of the film, he has lost all hope of revenge as well. It is okay to show a hero at his most powerless and desperate in the middle act. I still wish Maximus had something going on for him other than trying to prove some vague point, but whatever, it's fine. I suppose having Maximus deeply lament that he has to take lives that would end soon anyway would have been pointless. Then comes the scene that resets the pieces and paves the way for Maximus to be a character that has agency, has a powerful singular goal that the audience can get behind once more. When Maximus says he wants to stand in front of the Emperor, it seems all is clear. Maximus is going after his revenge. He may not have an interesting internal conflict here, or any internal conflict, but he has agency. His will and nobody else's. No more orders from his Emperor. No further battles for Marcus Aurelius or the glory of Rome. Just Maximus, Commodus, and vengeance. Except that's not really how it goes. Maximus seems prepared and motivated in the scene where Proximo tells him they will go to Rome to fight in the Colosseum. Then there's the first battle, and we get the famous scene where Maximus takes off his helmet, reveals he is alive, and states his goal. Only did you notice that before he says husband to a murdered wife, father to a murdered son, he says loyal servant to the true emperor Marcus Aurelius. Okay, maybe that doesn't really mean anything. The writers likely saved the most important lines for the end. In the scene that soon follows, where Lucilla meets Maximus in his cell, Maximus does seem focused on his family, only he appears somewhat inconsistent to me. Where he was more than happy to come to Rome before and even seemed mildly hopeful, now he's saying that he's powerless and suggests that he might as well be dead. So what happened? The only thing that happened is that Maximus revealed himself in front of the Colosseum, won over the crowd, and as per Lucilla's words, became even more powerful than Commodus. So now that Maximus won the crowd, he's no longer as hopeful or as concerned with avenging his family. Why? Honestly, I can't figure this out. It feels like Maximus was written by two different screenwriters, and they didn't quite agree with each other on what his mental state was supposed to be. And now, back to the truly awful. In the next scene, Maximus is upset again, only he's not upset at his family's death. Instead, he is severely pissed off that Marcus Aurelius' vision of Rome hasn't been realized, and is yelling at Proximo about this. I'll be honest, the brief speech after Maximus takes off his helmet almost convinced me that his family was something more than a plot device. But this scene of him yelling about Marcus Aurelius and his vision extinguishes that belief completely. When Commodus once again enters the arena and taunts Maximus over his family's death, Maximus decides against attacking him after glancing at Lucilla and refers to Commodus as Your Highness. The subtext is clear here. Maximus decides not to lunge at Commodus and break his neck because Lucilla proposed that Maximus help her and the senators with their planned coup. This is where it becomes damn clear that Maximus' family was nothing more than a lame plot device after all. This is also where Maximus once again loses his own agency. He was just taunted, mocked and belittled by the man who had his family brutally killed, but he didn't even attempt to take revenge because Lucilla had already changed his mind, and now he believed once again that the glory of Rome was more important. When Senator Gracchus asks Maximus why he would give power back to the Senate if the coup is successful, Maximus replies, because that was the last wish of a dying man. And let me just get this out of the way immediately as well. No, this situation doesn't give Maximus an internal conflict, at least not for long. He is not the one being convinced to take part in the coup here, nor is he arguing that he would rather kill Commodus the first chance he gets. It is Senator Gracchus that needs convincing, and Maximus is already all on board with Lucilla's grand plans and has apparently forgotten what he actually came to Rome for. This is evidenced by how upset he was at Commodus' Rome not living up to Marcus Aurelius' vision, and by how easily Lucilla talked him into attempting a coup. How the hell is anyone supposed to get emotionally involved in Maximus' desire to avenge his family when that is only number 2 on his list of priorities? That's right, his family is once again playing second fiddle to the wishes of Marcus Aurelius. Marcus Aurelius was more important than his family when both were alive, and Marcus Aurelius is more important to Maximus now that both are dead. For Filifionka's sake, Maximus' last words in the film are not, "I have avenged my family." His last words are, There was a dream that was Rome. It shall be realized. Those were the wishes of Marcus Aurelius. Even when he's half in Elysium, moments away from being reunited with his wife and son, he is still concerned with the glory of Rome. It's honestly kind of pathetic and not good character writing in my opinion. I'd like to add one more thing to my list of grievances against Maximus as a character. Maximus isn't just a shell compared to some Super Nintendo video game characters. He's also pathetically boring and one note compared to every other character in Gladiator itself, which is a problem because he is the protagonist. Consider any of the side characters from Gladiator. Marcus Aurelius is more compelling than Maximus. He dares to question his own legacy. He's a man that has held enormous power throughout his life, but now that he's facing death, he wonders if he still has enough power to maybe rewrite his place in history. That's interesting. What about Lucilla? She is a very conflicted character with a lot at stake. Lucilla must weigh her need to keep her son safe against her desire to remove her brother from the throne and return Rome to the people. That's also interesting. Even a minor character like Quintus is interesting, because he actually feels conflicted regarding his orders, more so than Maximus ever did. There's a pivotal scene in the film where Quintus makes the unethical choice to follow orders and betray Maximus. At the end of the film, he makes the right choice and refuses to give Commodus a sword, thus defying his orders and giving Maximus a fair chance in the fight. Quintus goes from following orders begrudgingly to deciding based on his own conscience. That's a decent arc, which is more than what Maximus gets. Maximus just follows the wishes of Marcus Aurelius from beginning to end. Even if all this doesn't change anyone's opinion of Maximus, I hope you can at least see why I feel that he's a failure of character writing. Looking at his external journey, there's something there. From a general to a slave to a gladiator, from a gladiator to the savior of Rome. But there's nothing inside Maximus, no internal struggle, no emotional or psychological arc, and every single side character is more interesting and has more agency than he does. And now, let's briefly discuss why I might be wrong. This, in my opinion, is essential to all internet art critics. Whether we're huge on YouTube or only have a few dozen followers, we all need to be open to different opinions and counter-arguments that have the potential to slightly dislodge or even completely debunk our positions. If there's one thing I despise more than Maximus Decimus Meridius, it is when internet critics practice what I've coined soft censorship. Occasionally, someone with a platform online will criticize a work of art and then attempt to delegitimize potential counter-arguments by saying things like, "The fanboys will cry their pardon because they don't know any better," or "Of course the fans blinded by nostalgia will say this or that." I hate when anyone does that. Attempting to preemptively shelter an unpopular or popular opinion from criticism like that is nothing more than intellectual cowardice. I will never do that, and I will never be that. So, why might I be wrong about Maximus being one of the worst film heroes ever? Honestly, regarding how he's written, there is only one defense I can think of that might change my opinion of Maximus, and that defense only applies for the later parts of the film. See, I wasn't entirely correct when I said earlier that Maximus' final words in the film are concerned with Marcus Aurelius and the glory of Rome. His final public statement is concerned with that. But his last line in the film is one he directs only at Lucilla, and that line is, "Lucius is safe." One could argue that Maximus decided to take part in Lucilla and the Senator's coup not just because he cared about Marcus Aurelius and his vision, but because he thought protecting Lucilla and Lucius was an opportunity to redeem himself from not having been able to save his own family. This is a somewhat good counter-argument in my opinion, even if it cannot explain why Maximus had several scenes where he emphasized the life and vision of Marcus Aurelius and not a single scene where he expressed concern for Lucius before the end. If the writers were going for such a redemption arc, they should have made it more clear. Still, I think there is validity to this argument, and I empathize with those who might bring it up as a reason why Maximus isn't a horrible character after all. There are other reasons to like Maximus and his story. For example, Russell Crowe's convincing performance, Hans Zimmer's breathtaking score, and Ridley Scott's direction. I don't think Gladiator is Ridley Scott's crowning achievement in directing. In fact, it might not even be top 5 for me as far as his films are concerned, but he's still a master of his craft. There are many beautiful shots in Gladiator, and when those combine with Crowe's acting and Zimmer's music, like in the scenes where Maximus is desperately trying to reach his family in time, the results are quite magnificent. These scenes are so well done and engaging that it is easy to root for Maximus even if one thinks he's poorly written. And of course, there's nothing at all wrong with liking Maximus, enjoying his story or the film as a whole, whether or not one can articulate the reasons behind it. So, that's that. My unpopular opinion regarding Gladiator's main hero. I hope you found this video at least somewhat entertaining. Please share your opinions on Maximus and on my ramblings in the comment section if you have the time and desire to do so. I promise I will read and respond to all the comments, even those that just call me a moron or a bucket of farts. Thank you for watching and listening. May you always find great art to enjoy, and may you never run out of coffee and cookies.